I would love to read.
Well, it's time.
Senate will please come to order. For today's devotionals, they will be conducted by our good friend, Reverend Rick Swanson of the St. John's in the Mountains Episcopal Church of Stowe. Welcome.
I invite all who are able to please stand. God of peace and hope, gathered this day, we seek your blessing on this body of elected leaders. May they listen to one another and hear the dream everyone holds for the good people of Vermont. Guide their deliberations, give them a garland of peace in times of discord, and endue them with hope when they face the unknown. We ask this in the abundance of your love. Amen. Amen.
Are there any announcements? By way of announcement on behalf of the Committee on Committees, I would like to announce the following senators for the Budget Adjustment Act, which number I do not recall at the moment, but conferees for the Budget Adjustment Act, H 839, Senators Kitchell, Perchlik, and Westland. We have 4 House bills for reference. The first being H 247, which passed House on February 15th. Please listen to the first reading of the bill by title.
H 247, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to Committee on Health and Welfare. We have H 563, which passed the House on the 13th of February. Please listen to the first reading of the bill by title.
H 563, an act relating to criminal motor vehicle offenses, including unlawful trespass, theft, or unauthorized operation.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to Committee on Judiciary. We have H 649, which passed the House on February 14th. Please listen to the first reading of the bill by title.
H 649, an act relating to the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Government Operations, and we have H 801, which passed the House on February 15th. Please listen to the first reading of the bill by title.
H 801, an act relating to approval of the adoption of the Charter of the Town of Waterbury.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Government Operations. That brings us to the orders of the day. We have on today's action calendar S309. S309 was read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Transportation, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill. Sorry.
S309, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to laws related to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and Vessels.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Transportation, the Senator from Washington.
So this is the annual miscellaneous DMV bill. Just like other committees have miscellaneous bills to do cleanup language, just correct some things. So I'd say a little over half of this bill fits into that category. These are items that the Department of Motor Vehicles brought over to us to correct, and more technical changes, updating things that needed to be updated that they discovered. We also added a few things to the DMV bill based on some other bills that we had in that committee, and so we will go through those. It's going to be myself as a presenter, but I'm also going to get assistance from the Senator from Essex and the Senator from Chittenden Southeast, the one that's on the Transportation Committee. And so we're going to start off. I'm going to yield to the Senator from Essex.
The Senator from Washington yields to the Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Section 1 is a definition of a transporter. Currently, there are persons in Vermont who sell a few, but less than what would qualify for as a dealer. This section amends the definition to include a new subdivision that those persons that sell or exchange new or used vehicles but are not engaged in business according to the threshold of 12+ vehicles. Section 2, application to be registered as a transporter. Currently, in order to be registered as a transporter, the transporter needs to present proof of insurance and business locations with hours and record storage to records storage to the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. This section amends statute to just require a self-certification, not proof, from the transporter. Section 3 is definitions of all surface vehicles. Currently, all surface vehicles need to have 6 to 8 wheels. This section amends the statute to allow for all surface vehicles to have up to 8 wheels. And I would like to yield back to the Senator from Washington, please.
Senator from Essex yields to the Senator from Washington.
That brings us to sections 4 through 9. We start on page 264 of today's calendar. This is a change to the record keeping requirements. We're making some changes to titling of vehicles and vessels, anything that needs a title. These sections 4 through 9 create a new section in statute that just is about how DMV should be keeping these records. It says that if there's an old original record, we have titles going way back, they will electrify or whatever, put those as an electric image. They're going to take photos of those and put them in the computer, but they have to keep the original for 5 years and then in perpetuity keep those electronic files of all the titles. So that is sections 4 through 9. Sections 10 on page 265 is about registrations. These sections amend statute to permit temporary residents to register their motor vehicles in Vermont. So we have people that live in Vermont on part of the year. And in the past, the way the statute was written, they weren't allowed to register their vehicles here because they weren't permanent residents. They were required to register in other places. So this would allow somebody, whether they be a business that's doing work here temporarily, or somebody that's just living in the state temporarily, to register a vehicle and get Vermont plates, basically. So that's what sections 10 and 11 do on registrations. The section 12 is the weight limits on low numbered plates. Folks know that there's any plate, I think under 999, or maybe it's 9,999. Those are under the control of the Commissioner of the Department of Motor Vehicles. So sometimes you'll see these plates around that's like, 497 or 3,333. These are coveted plates. There's a whole process about how they get disseminated, who you can pass them on to and who you can't pass them on to. But there was an inconsistency in the statute if you had a conservation plate or if you had like a Let's Grow Kids plate, those other special plates in the low numbered plates, it specifically said they were only for pleasure vehicles. Pleasure vehicles are defined by weight. So if you had a Toyota Tundra and you wanted to have your low number plate that you got and you inherited from your grandmother, the statute wouldn't allow you to put that on your Toyota Tundra because it was not considered a pleasure vehicle by the weight. So this change allows these low numbered vehicles, and especially like the conservation plates, to go on these heavier vehicles. That's what this section does, up to 26,001 pounds. Section 13 is the prorated refunds of registration fees. So as you might know, you can register your vehicle for 1 year. You save a little money if you do it for 2 years. But after a year, you lose the car or something, car gets stolen, you can get a refund for that second year. We didn't have a thing in statute to do that there's registrations for some vehicles for 4 years and 5 years. So we needed language in the statute that basically gives you 1/5 of that based on if it's a 5-year registration, or 1/4 if it's a 4-year registration. So we just putting current practice into law about how we refund folks that register a vehicle or a trailer or an ATV for multiple years. So sections 14 through 16, this was something that we added, was not brought over by DMV, and this is about tinted windows. We had a bill from Senator from Chittenden Central that had this in this. We didn't take up the whole bill, but we took up the issue about tinted windows. Heard a lot of testimony about the safety issues around tinted windows, and this section is what we did with this. But basically, the federal law allows you to have in-window tint. So like manufacturer will tint the window 30%. That's a federal law. They can manufacture a vehicle and sell it with 30% tint, which means 70% of the light still gets through. So if you go buy a new car, you can get the front, the driver's side, and the the driver's window and the driver's passenger window with this 30% tint. But current law doesn't allow you to put any tint on an aftermarket vehicle. So if you have a used car or a new car and you want to put tint, you can't do anything. It's basically any glazing was not allowed. And so we had instances where people would, and you could, so that was the law. You could not have tint, but it was, you could still get inspected. So you could go get tint on your window to 100%. You could go get it inspected. They would inspect it, pass inspection. There's a note on your inspection says like, we're passing this, but we're notifying you that this is in violation of the law. But it was just on the piece of paper. We got the feeling that not everybody was noticing that when they were getting it inspected, that they were getting stuck, because then they might get pulled over and the police officer would say, you're in violation of the law because you're tinting your windows to this 100% or anything. And they'd say, well, I just got my car inspected yesterday, so how could this be, against the law? But the law was that you had no window tinting. So what we've done here is a couple things. We have brought Vermont statute up to the federal law that says you can have tinting up to this 30%, or up to allow, you have to at least allow 70% of the lighting. We're doing this to change the law, so that would be the law. And then we're also asking DMV to change the inspection manual to make this a fail. So in the future, that when you go to get your car inspected, if it's over 30%, this would mean that the inspection stations have to have a little light meter that they would put on your window. Then you would not pass inspection. But we're doing this not till 2026. We're giving DMV some time with their computer changeover and work with the inspection stations and the computer work that they have to do with the tablets that the inspectors use. But also we're expecting other changes to the inspection manual, which you'll hear next. And also future changes. There was a change we thought about putting in around motorcycle mufflers, but there's a report coming in next year, so we're going to wait for that. So we thought instead of having DMV have to change the rule every year for the next 3 years, we're allowing this to happen in 2026. It also gives the tinting shops, which we've heard from, some time to adjust what they're telling their customers and preparing for this change. So that's what we did on window tinting. And for the next section, I'm going to yield to the senator from Chittenden Southeast, the one that's on transportation.
The senator from Washington yields to the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be speaking about first section 17, rusted brake rotors, which is on page 270 of today's calendar, if you're so interested to follow along. Currently, rusted brake rotors should only lead a motor vehicle to fail the annual safety inspection per the periodic inspection manual if the rust is, quote, a condition of any swelling, delamination, or pitting. But it is possible, and argued by some quite common, that certified inspection mechanics are interpreting rust to also include surface rust. So this language, this section here expresses the legislative intent that the DMV should provide information on what is rust for purposes of failing the annual safety inspection, to provide this to all certified inspection mechanics, and that surface rust should not be sufficient for a motor vehicle to fail inspection because that rust does not cause diminished braking performance that prevents a motor vehicle from adequately stopping. It also requires the DMV to issue a clarifying administrative bulletin to all certified inspection mechanics that details the rejection criteria for rotors and drums in the periodic inspection manual. It explains the differences between surface rust and rust that is considerable for purposes of the rejection criteria, and provides information that an inspection mechanic should give to the owner of a motor vehicle that fails the annual safety inspection due to rusting on rotors and drums. This also requires that contact information for the DMV be included on all notices of failures issued by certification inspection mechanics. Sections 18 through 23 all have to do with emergency warning lamps and sirens, so I'll speak to them in one lump. Currently, a motor vehicle can only have a siren or signal lamp not defined, colored, other than the number, currently a motor vehicle can only have a siren or signal lamp colored other than amber if the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles has issued a permit for that siren or signal lamp or both. These sections amend statute to allow sirens and emergency warning lamps to be used on certain government-owned motor vehicles without a permit, and explicitly prohibits blue lights and flashing lights in a color other than amber on vehicles outside of those government-owned with a permit. So section 18 amends statute to explicitly prohibit a siren unless a permit is issued by the commissioner or one is not needed under statute. It also prohibits emergency warning lamps with definition added unless a permit is issued by the commissioner or one is not needed under statute. Also prohibits a blue light of any kind unless a permit is issued by the commissioner or one is not needed under statute. It also prohibits a lamp or lamps that is not an emergency warning lamp and provides flashing light in the color other than amber. In the committee discussions, it's just important that when people see a blue light, that it definitely denotes that your law enforcement is on scene. So this is a restriction on those decorative lights that are increasingly popular that emit a blue emitted signal, which can lead people to conclude that law enforcement is present when they are not. Section 19 amends statute to allow government-owned law enforcement vehicles to, without permit, use sirens, blue and combination emergency signal lamps, and a red combination emergency signal lamp provided is mounted to be visible primarily from the rear of the vehicle. It also amends statute to preserve the status quo of law enforcement vehicles owned by certified law enforcement needing a permit to use sirens, blue and or combinations, emergency signal lamps, and a red or combination emergency signal lamp provided is mounted to be visible primarily from the rear. It also allows law enforcement vehicles owned or leased by a certified constable for a municipality that has not voted to limit the constable's authority to engage in enforcement activities. Without permit, use a red or combination thereof. I also will be coming back with a small amendment to this language afterwards, just adding county to the eligible entities that are don't need to pursue a permit. So you'll be hearing from me again after we go through this entire bill. All right, sections 24 and 25 have to do with child restraint systems, AKA car seats. This came over to us in a separate bill that also included some information about sunscreen, which was recommitted to your Senate Committee on Health and Welfare. This is the language regarding child restraint systems. Currently, statute only requires a child to be rear facing until the child reaches the later of 1 year old or 20 pounds. And in a child restraint system until turning 5 years old, which is inconsistent with best practices and recommendations from the 2018 American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement that recommends that children remain rear-facing for as long as the manufacturer's specifications permit and forward-facing in a 5-point harness for as long as the manufacturer's specifications permit. This section amends statute to be more consistent with the 2018 American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement and requires a public outreach campaign by the Vermont Department of Health to educate Vermonters on the change of law, policy statement, and car seat safety. I'm going to go to sections 26 through 30. These has to do with exempt vehicle titles. Big picture, this is when statute was amended back in 2023 miscellaneous DMV bill to eliminate exempt vehicle titles. What was available for vehicles was that were more than 15, formerly 25 years old. And so vehicle titles in advance of vehicle services phase of the DMV modernization project, there were a few exempt vehicle title references in statute that were not deleted. So in many ways, this is some cleanup language. And the certificate of title exemption for vehicles that were moved were more than 15 years old on January 1st, 2024 did not account for a certificate of being issued upon change of ownership. These sections amend statute to eliminate remaining references to exempt vehicle title that can be deleted and amend the certificate of title exemption to only apply for vehicles that are more than 15 years old on January 1st, 2024 until there is a change in ownership. Now I'd like to yield the floor over to the senator from Essex for section 31.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast yields to the senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Section 31, fire extinguishers on vessels, otherwise known as boats. The big picture, the U.S. Coast Guard has regular audits on Vermont law and frequently identifies aspects of Vermont law that should be updated to reflect federal law or regulation. This section amends statute to track and adds to tracks and gives applicable minimums and adds a new allowance for previously approved fire extinguishers on motorboats with a model year between 1953 and 2017 to include to be used until they are no longer in good service and conditions. Section 32, numbering provisions for vessels. The U.S. Coast Guard does regular audits of Vermont law and frequently identifies aspects of Vermont law and should be updated to reflect federal law or regulation. This section amends statute to require that a vessel in Vermont have a Vermont number once it has been in Vermont for more than 60, not 90 days as the old law was. And that any vessel that does not get a new number, a Vermont registered number, and not the number that it came into the state with, it would not be in compliance with the law. I would like to now, Mr. President, yield to back to the senator from Chittenden Southeast, please.
Senator from Essex yields to the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
So looking at section 33, the masking of convictions for CDLs and CLPs, the federal regulation prohibits pursuant to 49 CFR 384.226 prohibits a state from masking, deferring imposition of judgment, or allowing an individual to enter into a diversion program that would prevent a CLP or CDL holder's conviction for any violation in any type of motor vehicle of a state or local traffic control law other than parking vehicle weight or vehicle defect violations from appearing on the CDL's driver record, IS driver record, whether the driver was convicted for an offense or committed in the state where the driver is licensed for another state. This section amends our statute to identically track to the applicable federal regulation. I'd now like to yield the floor back over to the senator from Washington to talk about airbags.
The senator from Chittenden Southeast yields to the the senator from Washington.
Yes, we expected something to be said about the biggest airbag in the section 34 is on page 280 if you want to follow along. And this, we already have statute about installing counterfeit airbags. This expands it because currently it's a crime for installing, reinstalling, or causing to be installed a counterfeit airbag. You know, just think of an airbag that doesn't work as an airbag, so it doesn't provide the safety features. This section maintains that crime and criminal penalty, but it expands the prohibition to apply to the knowing manufacturing, importation, distribution, offering for sale, selling, leasing, or transferring these defunct or counterfeit airbags. Along with that, we also have a new definition of counterfeit automobile supplement restraint system component to make it clear what we're talking about. We had testimony from other states where these counterfeit airbags were not only counterfeit, that they didn't work, but they were taking them in, stamping them with a Honda logo. So it looked like a real Honda airbag, but that was all part of the counterfeit process. So that's why we wanted to have the law expand to manufacturing, importation, and distribution. So this law just extends that existing criminal penalty to make sure, try to disencourage anybody from doing counterfeit airbags in the state. It's following laws that's been passed in several other states, hoping to pass them in all states. But we want to be clear that this does not prohibit an aftermarket airbag company from selling aftermarket airbags. There was some concern on the committee that this was going to require you always getting the dealer's components. So this doesn't prohibit it. Right now, there aren't any certified aftermarket airbags because of the liability and difficulty around calibrating the airbags. But if somebody wanted to sell those and get them certified, then they would be allowed to do so. So that terminates or ends our testimony on the DSM miscellaneous motor vehicle bill S309. The vote in committee was 5-0-0. I will let you know some of the witnesses that we had. We heard from Senators Gulick and Renner on their bills that had components in here. We heard from the Commissioner of DMV. We heard from Brendan Atwood, Public Health Policy Advisor from the Department of Health on the car seats, Captain Scott Davidson, Chief Inspector of DMV, Michael Smith, Deputy Commissioner of DMV, Thomas Howard, Acting Lieutenant Sergeant Howard from the Vermont State Police, Sheriff Mark Anderson from the Vermont Sheriff's Association, Lieutenant Alan Horton, the County Highway Safety Coordinator, the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance, Stephanie Winters, the Deputy Executive Director of Vermont Medical Society, Judith Fenless, the Director of State Affairs for the Alliance of Automotive Innovation, that's the manufacturers. Craig Orland, the Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Honda Motor Company. Matt Coda from the Vermont Vehicle and Automobile Distributors Association. Justice Johnson for General Motors. Bob Church, who's an automotive program instructor at Burlington Tech Center, that was on the Road Arrest. John Lynn, co-owner of Will Charlie Davidson, although we didn't include the section on mufflers of motorcycles, so if you're around in future years, you might hear about that. We heard from Philip Reynolds, who's the owner of Tint My Ride. He's tinted over 40,000 vehicles, he said. And we also heard from our magnificent Ledge Council, Anthea Dexter Cooper, who I should remark is also, this is her last day in Ledge Council. We are very sad that this is her last day in the Transportation Committee, but we were very proud of the work that she's done and very content that we've been able to work with these last years. When I came to the Senate, was also the first year that Councilor Dexter Cooper came to the Transportation Committee. So we've kind of learned at the same time. So it's sad to go. And I know we can't actually acknowledge that her service on the Senate floor, but I wanted to at least say those words. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did consider a floor amendment today to call for Anthea to stay with the legislature, but I was talked out of doing so. So your Senate Finance Committee did consider this bill, and it includes a prorated registration fee refund for 5-year registrations that are canceled prior to the registration expiration date, something that we are already doing. So the JFO note does estimate that this bill will have a de minimis impact on state revenues and expected to have a negligible impact. They also use that term. So your Committee on Finance did vote to advance this bill 5-1-1.
Big words. There is now an amendment also on the calendar to the Transportation Committee report that is offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast and others. So for that amendment, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
After we moved this through our committee process, so we did hear from additional feedback and question comment on the language in section 19. It currently does not include county county entities, and there are county entities that do need to apply for different permits and sirens. So all this does is add a county after municipality. So municipal entities, county entities are in the same permit process for the blue lights and other lights. Your 4 senators that their names on this, all on Senate Transportation.
So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Transportation be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast and others? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Orange.
Mr. President, the reporter of the bill in his introduction mentioned that the bill contained miscellaneous corrections to law and added some other things to the bill based upon other bills that the Transportation Committee had in committee. I won't ask what, there's a bill in committee which would have people that drive electric vehicles pay a fee that was the average fee for road use taxes here in the state of Vermont. And I understand that that's not in this bill. And I wanted to interrogate the reporter of the bill.
If I might for the moment suggest that the current pending question is actually the amendment found on page 283, adding the words "a county" to the report of the Committee on Transportation. So I might ask you to forego the question for the moment till we get to the question on the underlying report.
Absolutely, Mr. President. I have driven off the road and you have pulled me back onto this.
As we all do for our neighbors. The pending question is, shall the report of the Committee on Transportation be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on Transportation as offered by the Senator from Chittenden and others. I'd like to recognize the Senator from Orange. And then I'd also like to recognize the Senator from Washington to be interrogated, if I could be so clairvoyant to interpret what your need is.
I must confess, I may drive off the road again, but, without repeating the question, the reporter of the bill answer what the fate is.
Mr. President, if I understand the question correctly, is why does the miscellaneous DMV not include a fee for electric vehicles? Is that the correct question?
I believe that is the correct question.
Okay, so we have talked about this quite a bit in the committee, and we decided it's not a miscellaneous DMV issue. We're going to have the transportation bill, which deals with the entire transportation program, all the spending and fees that are collected. So we thought that was a more appropriate place to have that discussion. And there is interest in having some kind of EV fee. That we had testimony about the agency's plan to do a miles-based user fee for electric vehicles. And we are going to continue that discussion whether a miles-based user fee, which Oregon and Utah have taken as an approach. And do we want to go that way, or do we want to go to the flat fee? There's pros and cons of each one, so we will continue to discuss it, and we would welcome to have the senator from Orange in to give us his testimony on the issue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those of us that drive electric vehicles have to answer to our constituents about why we are freeloaders when it comes to driving on the highways of the state. And being those who drive electric vehicles, I don't believe do it to avoid paying road use taxes like every other Vermonter pays when they drive on the highways of the state. And I'm pleased to hear that there's a bill that will be coming up later, which will give due consideration to this issue and perhaps will relieve us from the bumper sticker that we would, if we were being totally honest, put on the back of our cars, which said, "We are freeloading on the highways of the state." Thank you.
I won't bring up Freddie the freeloader, that would age me too much, but the senator from Orange knows what I'm talking about. Mr. President, the Senate Judiciary Committee looked at section 30 of the bill having to do with counterfeit airbags and supports the Transportation Committee's amendment in that section. Thank you.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have questions on two different sections and two different reporters of the bill. So I first would love to interrogate the reporter of section 18, which was the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
The senator from Chittenden Southeast will is recognized as a reporter of the section.
Thank you, Mr. President. When you were reporting this section, you spoke very quickly. So firefighters or volunteer EMS or something like that. But is that a reasonable assumption, or could they just be anybody?
Mr. President, it'd be hard for me to project all the intents, but I would surmise that possibly individuals that usually need to report, no matter what the weather conditions are, to a job of certain different functions might want to be inclined to have an additional yellow alerting light, just so that people are aware that the vehicle is operating in otherwise difficult conditions. So I don't believe there are any restrictions, because many job functions require to get up in the middle of the night, no matter what the weather out there, to get to their profession.
But what I'm understanding from you is that it's not necessarily that they have a job that they need to get to or a volunteer thing. It could be anybody. Is that correct?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
Mr. President.
Because I just have to say that they are confusing. And is when a driver sees a yellow light behind them, does the law apply that you're supposed to pull over for that yellow light?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr. President. I could
Okay.
find that out for third reading, or if you'd like to take a short recess.
No, third reading is fine. I'm just wondering about clarification, because then also that does say in your amendment on page 274, that paragraph, the amber signal lights, that they shall be on road maintenance vehicles and service vehicles and wreckers. So there are some vehicles that are required to have the amber lights, yes?
That too, I would not want to answer confidently without further consultation, and I'd be happy to answer that at third reading, or we can take a short recess.
No, third reading is fine. Slow down, take a deep breath. I appreciate that you're trying to clarify in here about the blue lights, and I think it's really important that blue lights are only on, and red lights for that matter. But I'm just wondering if the average citizen understands the difference between all those kinds of lights. Because I think a lot of people, when they're just seeing the flashing lights, they're like, oh, I should pull over, and it's confusing. So I just was seeking clarification for clarification on that, but it sounds like anybody can have those amber lights, which I find a little concerning because they're confusing to drivers. But that was my question for the senator from Chittenden Southeast, so I thank you. And now I have a question for the senator from Essex.
Senator from Essex is interrogated as a reporter of the section to be by the senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm looking at section 31. And I have a question on page 279, paragraph 2. The old vessels or motorboats between the years of 1953 and 2017. I just want to make sure, I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure that they can have the old kind of extinguishers, but even if they have the old kinds of fire extinguishers, they still actually have to function, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Okay, that is helpful to make sure. And then this might be a question for legislative council, so I'm gonna ask you, and maybe you can find out for third reading for me. In a couple of these lists, and I will admit, this is my grammar pet peeve, and it's used incorrectly here. For example, on paragraph A, on the bottom of page 278, less than 26 feet in length, not less than one fire extinguisher. I believe that should be not fewer than one fire extinguisher. And again, in paragraph B, not fewer than 2 fire extinguishers. And then atop of page 279, not fewer than 1 extinguisher. Less is used for volume, and fewer is used for numbers. So that's just a grammar pet peeve. And if you could ask legislative council before third reading about that, I would appreciate it.
Mr. President, we will do so.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Windsor.
A haiku on the drafter's last day. Anthea Dexter Cooper, alleged council star. We say adieu. Thank you.